This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Who's got it better than us?
Nobody.
You got a date with justice.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Justice Report. I am your host, Brandon Justice. It's great to be back. We did have this going for a long time, and it's back, and I'm happy that it's back, and I'm happy that all of my, I guess you could call loyal fans, will be joining us once more. Just a little insight as to what we'll be talking about here as we progress. A lot of Michigan football, as you can probably guess, a lot of Michigan recruiting, as you all probably know, and why a lot of you flocked here. I myself cover recruiting for landof10.com. You can find me there, landof10.com/Michigan. Then you can find all your other Big Ten sites. We have coverage in Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan State, and I think for now that's pretty much it. We've got coverage on the East Coast as well from Corey Messiak. He covers all of it there. I'm happy to be there. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be doing all these crazy things to be doing for myself. It's still kind of an awe for me, but I'm just happy to be here. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of things, previewing Penn State, talking some recruiting, of course. There's a lot of crazy things happening today. So Michigan comes into this game 3-0, number 4 in the country for the first time in a very long time. Penn State comes in 2-1 with the loss to Pitt, just beat Temple last week. Their team has lost 3 linebackers starting. Looks like a rough year going right now for the Nittany Lions. Obviously, James Franklin could potentially be on the hot seat. As far as recruiting goes, you're getting a visitor list that is combined about 20 to 25 stars and it really could reel in a commit. A guest joining us today, she is a beat reporter for Penn State. Her name is Jourdan Rodrigue. We're going to have her on here in just a couple of minutes. And just to give you a little more information on the show, this is going to be airing every Saturday morning. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, which is, I'm sure is how you're listening now. If not, if you're an Android user, we do have other platforms as well, which is, I'm sure, how you'd found it at this point. And then I'll be linking those on my Twitter as well, which you can follow at Land of Justice. And you can follow the network on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. And then you can follow Land of 10 at Land of 10. So we're going to bring Jourdan on now. She's going to give us a little insight into Penn State, and we'll be happy to chat with her. All right, so we're joined with Jourdan Rodrigue. Am I saying that right?
It's Rodrigue, but you were so close. I appreciate the effort.
Yeah, the effort was A+, I feel. So she's a beat writer, and she covers Penn State, which is obviously the opponent today. Tell us a little bit about Penn State's motivation going into this game, how the team, how the city, how they're feeling right now heading into Ann Arbor, obviously a team that they have a strong history with.
Well, Penn State's been practicing all week, obviously, for the atmosphere, so pumping truly ear-splitting crowd noise into the practice fields, and you can honestly hear it on the other side of town. It's pretty crazy. And, you know, the team is also dealing with a lot of injuries right now, so I think that the approach is pretty measured. They're not going in thinking, you know, this is going to be our upset. They're kind of going in thinking we're gonna do what we can with what we have. And that's just kind of been my impression from James Franklin and from players this week.
So with the injuries, it sounds like they could potentially have, or they do have, all 3 of their starting linebackers out. How are they, you know, replacing those 3? Who's going to be replacing them, and what do you expect from them?
So last week, Jason Kabinda, his hand's in a cast. He's their starting middle linebacker, did not start the game. And Brandon Bell is their starting strong side linebacker, Sam Becker. He did not start either, and he's on crutches. Obviously, James Franklin doesn't really go into injuries very much, but then Naeem Mormon-White, who shifted over into the middle linebacker position, he's their guy with the most experience, 5th-year senior. He then kind of buckled his leg, which he had been kind of rehabbing from ACL surgery the year before, kind of buckled underneath him, and he was announced out for the season. So behind him, middle linebacker this weekend, Brandon Smith is going to start. And it's kind of a cool story with him because he's a former walk-on, and he picked walking on to Penn State over going to Penn or any similar Ivy League school because he really wanted to play football. So he came in. He did, I think, an admirable job kind of holding things down. He had 8 tackles against Temple last week. And then on either side of him, Manny Bowen and Jake Cooper are sophomores, and they were kind of thrown into the same situation last year when Naeem Mormon-White and Brandon Bell both left the game. They got hurt about a quarter of the way through the season, and Naeem was hurt in the season opener last year. So both of these guys have been thrown into this role before. I think that mentally they're prepared. Fundamentally, there's always a little bit of concern with Penn State's tackling as of late. They're kind of using their shoulders instead of their whole bodies to wrap up. So that's been worked on a lot in practice. And behind them, there's really not a lot of depth. They moved a safety, Koa Farmer, who was originally a linebacker but was having some issues keeping his weight managed. They moved him back to linebacker. Then they moved a former running back, Jonathan Thomas. He's a third-string linebacker. And then they decided they weren't going to redshirt their Maryland product, Cam Brown, who's a really athletic talent, but he just doesn't have the weight on him yet to really make a huge impact in Big Ten play. So I think they're a little worried about throwing him in there too soon, but they definitely said that we could probably expect to see him get a few reps against Michigan. It's crazy, but yeah, there's your full linebacker scouting report, and they're pretty thin, but I know that Brandon Smith, we got a chance to talk to him this week. I definitely think in terms of mentality and personality, if you have to lose your starting middle linebacker and then the guy backing up the starting middle linebacker, Brandon Smith's the guy you want coming in his place.
Yeah, we actually wrote about him on Lane at 10.
Corey wrote a great story about him.
Yeah,
I read Corey's story. It was really good.
Yeah, it was awesome. I actually really enjoyed that. So with the status of the linebackers and the defense, from what I've seen being a little bit less than par for a typical Penn State defense, especially considering the performance that they had in the defensive line last year, what is the best way for Penn State to attack Michigan's offense, in your opinion? What are they looking like they're preparing for, and what kind of way?
So I know that they're preparing for Michigan to use a lot of the kind of sweepstakes with Jabril Peppers that Pitt used against them with Quadre Henderson, a couple of their speedy receivers and their speedy slot guys. So I know they're looking for a lot of man in motion fakes, a lot of sweep fakes, and then some complementary running. So that's something that Pitt ran up 341. It was a lot rushing yards against them in week 2. And so the defensive line, they've been really working on their fundamentals and their gap accountability and making sure that they are sticking with their assignments instead of trying to necessarily make the big play that they saw these guys in front of them, the Carl Nassibs, the Anthony Zettles, the Austin Johnsons make all last year. So I think they're kind of settling down a little bit. And Parker Cothran is going to be on the interior line starting. He really had a big game for Penn State when a lot of those defensive starters went down, and he kind of held down the first tier. So I think that he's starting to settle into his position a little bit. Now, Michigan is going to be a much more physical team than they've seen. I think Pitt was pretty physical, but Michigan is going to be incredibly physical. So I'm not really sure quite what we'll see, but I know that there's definitely been some improvement this past week.
So as far as the team status, it looks like it's a little questioned whether or not James Franklin is in the hot seat or he's not in the hot seat. Now, that really all depends on the higher-ups and the powers that be inside of the administration at Penn State. So what's your take on that? Does a loss here, a bad loss here, kind of push that seat a little bit hotter, make it a little bit warmer, or is he safe as can be here? And I believe it's his third year, fourth year.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's in the hot seat. I know that there's a lot of speculation about that kind of externally, but I personally – I just don't see it because of how full, he had to rebuild the program from just almost from scratch and then set up these new recruiting pipelines, and that takes time. I think normally you see a coach in the hot seat when they're winning, 6 games, 7 games a year. You normally see them in the hot seat their third year, but because of the extenuating circumstances that Penn State faced, I think it's the 4th or 5th year that really will be the year in question for James Franklin, and he's in his third year now. So I think he's all right. Next year, I think that there are some big games on the schedule that he has to start winning. But this year, I think that people understand not only the youth on the team, but the injuries, and then this is his first full year with his full guys and their back to full scholarship. So I think next year might be the year, but definitely not this year.
So what are the fans talking about over in Happy Valley? What is the discussion here heading into the Michigan game? Are they confident? Are they, worried about a team right now that's number 4 in the country? I know a lot of people might think it's a little bit argued. Should Michigan be that high? Should they not? So what's the fans chatter like over there?
Well, everyone's pretty aware of what the line is set at. So I think that there's no question about that. I honestly think that fans are still a little wary of what I think the fans kind of understand what's going on with the team right now, which is a pleasant thing if you're a writer, because it's not really so much of a kill the messenger mentality when you're sharing, reasonable reasons why this team is not winning games. And so I think that the fact that they're putting a lot of points on the board, which they didn't do last year, And the fact that there's tangible improvement from week to week, and you can see not only in the stat line, but if you're watching the game, that's something that Penn State did not have last year. They were stagnant on offense last year. Every single game. Didn't matter who the opponent was, they were stagnant. And so this year, really pieces starting to click into place, and they really are admiring of Trace Victorley's play. He's tough and he's scrappy, and he can run. And so people, I think, are really looking forward to the future and really hoping that the team can put up a couple good fights here along the way in the Big Ten.
Do you think that there is, I think there's always a chance for every team in college football. And I really don't think this is a David versus Goliath kind of matchup, but obviously, like you pointed out, the spread is definitely, larger than perceived. So is there a key that Penn State has to have here to defeat Michigan? Is there a couple of things that you think have to happen in order for them to win? And do you think it's at all possible?
Yeah, well, they have to be a lot better on third down in the red zone than they have been. That honestly, I think that just comes with getting a lot of reps in with Joe Moorhead's new offense here. So I think that this will also be, on the other hand, I think this is probably going to be the toughest test Michigan has had to date. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it didn't seem like they were playing some crazy tough opponents here to open the schedule. But I think that Penn State has to be really consistent, and they have to open quickly like they hadn't been doing the first two games and then did a little bit more of the second game. And they really have to contain Jabril Peppers on every single play. Because,
side, right?
Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, Penn State, it's no small secret. They've given up 22 chunk plays on the ground in 3 games. So I think he's a guy that can really force those explosive plays, and I think if they're very aware and consistent with containment of him and aware of where he is on the field at all times, plus really fundamentally more sound than we've seen in terms of their second and third tier tackling, I think that they'll have a shot.
Great.
We'll see. We'll see.
So I have to ask you this: what are you most excited about to head to Ann Arbor? Just on a personal standpoint, anything exciting that you're looking to hit there? There's a lot of good food spots. If you don't know of them, I can give you some advice. But is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, so I come over from the West Coast. I've never been to the Big House before.
Okay.
Michigan came to Penn State, obviously, last year.
Right.
And I've never actually seen the stadium. So I'm actually getting there a little bit earlier tomorrow with our photographer, and we're going to kind of explore and check out what the tailgate scene is like and restaurants and kind of see what's going on in terms of the culture out there. I'm really excited to see it.
Awesome. Well, if I had to suggest one place to eat in Ann Arbor, I would probably say that you would go to Mr. Spots. Mr. Spots, if you like a good Philly cheesesteak, is probably the best I've ever had. That's probably my favorite spot in Ann Arbor.
So you think Michigan has a better Philly cheesesteak than Pennsylvania? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that this Michigan-styled Philly cheesesteak is pretty good, although I didn't take that into consideration. So if you're not going to hit that, then I would hit Maize and Blue Deli, probably one of the better sandwiches you're going to have. They're enormous, but there's a menu of about 145 different items, and it's all on a giant,
nice.
It's all on a giant whiteboard. It's incredible. There are Zingerman's, both great places. So, Jourdan, where can we find you at on Twitter?
All right, so you guys can follow me on Twitter at Jourdan Rodrigue, and that's a little tricky of a spelling, so I'll go ahead and do that for you. JOURDANRODRIGUE.
And you cover Penn State for the Center Daily Times.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, we're the local paper.
Awesome. Well, we want to thank Jourdan for joining us today. A lot of great stuff. Honestly, that was incredible for us to find out a lot that we didn't know. So we can segue that into the rest of today's show. Jourdan, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
All right, so that was Jourdan Rodrigue. She was terrific. A lot of great information from her, a lot of things that we didn't know about the linebacking core and things that can, heal that current bandage for them going into today's game. And then a lot about what Penn State needs to do to contain Michigan. It's obvious that Michigan is the better team going into play here right now, that they're higher ranked by a huge margin. I think Penn State they might squeak into the top 50 in the country right now, but outside of that, I mean, they're really nothing to prove. They haven't really proved anything this season as far as being, a good top 25 team. They barely hung on to Temple, who lost to Army by 3 possessions, and then they obviously lost to Pitt, which I think is a good team. I think Pat Narduzzi is a hell of a coach, and he's doing a great job out there. And he had a team that was inches away from going 11-1 last year, which is kind of, a little bit overlooked by a lot of people. But either way, Penn State looks like a team who doesn't have much of an identity. Think back to Michigan in 2007, trying to take a extremely traditional pro set offense and switch it and overhaul it into the spread offense. A lot of people thought that wasn't going to work, but as Jourdan pointed out, they're starting to click a little bit more. Obviously, the offense was very too vanilla last season, as she pointed out as well. So Penn State's going to bring in a spread offense, and we all know that Michigan struggles hanging on to a spread offense. But I think what they're getting here with this game is a quarterback that isn't Sefo Lufau, a quarterback that isn't, JT Barrett, or, even looking back to the Central Florida game with Justin Hallman, just how easily, or I shouldn't say easily, but how good he was against this defense. So you're looking at a quarterback that really isn't that fast, more of a pocket passer. So it shouldn't be, I don't want to call it an easy game. There's really no easy games in college football. But McSorley is the Penn State quarterback, went 18-24, 287 yards, a touchdown and an interception against Temple. A little bit of a lowly opponent there, if you ask me. They allowed 286 passing yards in the air. Looks like they only allowed 52 yards rushing from the starting running back there. He did manage to get 2 touchdowns. So you're looking at a Penn State team that's still in that traditional kind of defense, but they're missing a lot. And unfortunately, injuries are a huge factor into a game. Whether they can help it or not, Penn State is hurt. As I don't think they were going to be that great of a team, injured or not, healthy or not. But with the injuries that they have, especially those 3 linebackers being out, it looks like it's just going to be a tough day on Saturday for Penn State. Nonetheless, we'll look at the Michigan side of things now. We've heard all about Penn State side of things, so let's segue into what Michigan brings to the table. So last week, what we saw against Colorado, we saw a good Colorado team. I don't think there's any question about it. Colorado had votes to get into the top 25 heading into last week's game. And there was a lot of questions, is Colorado a legit football team? I think they proved that. No doubt they proved that on Saturday. And I'm not trying to sit here and sugarcoat, the Michigan win or, make the 28 points given up better. The only points that were given up on offense, I should say, are 21, obviously the 7 from the Spate sack. But Colorado brought the number 7 total defense heading into Saturday last week. They also brought the number 11 overall offense. So you're looking at a team that was top 15 on both sides of the ball, and a team that, with Oregon's loss to Nebraska, with the way that the Pac-12 looks overall, USC hasn't looked very good. Colorado could seriously be a sleeper in that conference. One upset over there, you're looking at a team that could be top 3. I think overall, if you're looking at the performances in the country right now, how the Pac-12 is played against non-conference opponents, Colorado could be a top 3, top 4 team over there in the Pac-12. But nonetheless, Michigan did have some struggles last week. They weren't very good against the pass whatsoever. The good news for that is that Jim Harbaugh went on the radio, I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago, and said that, like he always says, God willing, the creek don't rise. Jourdan Lewis and Taco Charlton will be back today to play against Penn State. So you're looking at a defensive end in Taco Charlton that is a game changer. You're looking at a defensive line with Michigan that has done great. I mean, they've done a fantastic job. They're no doubt the best unit on the defense heading into today's game. I think the linebackers have done a great job with Jabril Peppers and Mike McRae and Ben Gideon, all 3 doing outstanding jobs. But the defensive line has been a no-doubter. They haven't allowed many rush yards when Colorado tried to run on them. They had brought Sefo Lufau, who was a rushing quarterback who didn't rush on them really. I mean, obviously he brings a great arm and great legs to the game, but his legs were almost not a factor. But the thing that was overlooked most about this defensive line last week was people kind of jumped to the conclusion that Sefo Lufau's injury was a lucky kind of draw for Michigan, because as soon as he came out, they only had about 45 yards thereafter, after his injury. Obviously, he threw for the 80-yard pass to open the second half and then didn't come out for the next drive. And everything after that was downhill for Colorado. It looks like their largest drive after that was 17 yards, and that was the last drive of the football game for them. They had 3 that went for negative. They had a negative 5-yard drive, a negative 6-yard drive, and a negative 2-yard drive. One go for 1 yard, the other for 4 yards, and the other for 9. So they only gained more than 10 yards on a drive one time. So they had, looks like, 1 first down in the second half after that 80-yard play to open the half, and obviously after Sefo Lufau went out of the game. But an element into Sefo Lufau's injury, and I'm not saying that it's a good thing to get injured, but it wasn't a one-time hit. It wasn't like it wasn't a Justin Hallman situation like it was in Central Florida where he just pulled his hammy on a run and kind of had to exit the game. Sefo Lufau was taking a lot of hits the entire game, and you could see him just getting beat up, taking hits from Rashawn Gary, hits from Mo Hurst, who was everywhere last week. You even saw, Matt Godin getting in there, Chase Winovich playing a good ball game, and as always, Ryan Glasgow, proving his worth. So now you enter Taco Charlton in that mix, and a very unique and a very elite pass rusher off the edge there. You match him with Rashawn Gary on the other side, or Chris Wormley in the interior, and Mo Hurst in the interior. You're going to rotate those guys. It's a very good defensive line, and it just continues to be a great defensive line. The amount of depth they have is a little bit ridiculous, and they're still without Brian Monet, is what it looks like. They're not going to get him back today. The nose tackle from Michigan, who actually was rated when Harbaugh did his top 100 players. He always ranks his players no matter where he goes, which is a unique, kind of draw into things. He ranked Brian Monet, I believe, as the number 3 player on the team last season as a sophomore. And then obviously he tore his ACL before the Utah game, so never actually got to play down. And he played about maybe 3 drives in the Hawaii game before he got hurt and has been out ever since. So it doesn't look like they're going to get him back, but nonetheless, Taco Charlton, Mo Hurst, Chris Wormley, Rashawn Gary, Chase Winovich, Ryan Glasgow. It's just the names you can drop at that defensive line. They combined for 26 quarterback hits in one game last week, which is what Don Brown said he counted and the most that he's ever seen out of his defenses. So an incredible stat there. And then obviously, as I noted, the second half after Sefo Liufau went out. But even in the second quarter, they had the 62-yard drive to open the second quarter. But if you take a look here, they had 12 yards, -6, 22, -5, and -1 in the second quarter without a touchdown, obviously. They only scored 1 touchdown after the first quarter, and it was the Sefo Liufau 70-yard bomb. Segueing into Michigan's offense, how they're going to attack Penn State's defense, who not very good in the air. The defensive line is a little weak. Obviously missing all 3 linebackers. There really is no unit on this Penn State defense that should scare Michigan going in. Obviously, it's college football. Anything can happen. This isn't Michigan versus D2, FCS, Delaware, State Tech. It's Penn State. They're still a very well-coached team with some big names, some big recruits. Nonetheless, a quarterback who shows a lot of potential, just like Christian Hackenberg did at this point in his career. You look at this Michigan offense, though, and you look at Wilton Speight and how he struggled last week and how he's going to bounce back from that. His stat line wasn't really that bad. He didn't have an interception. He did have the fumble, but I'm not sure if you can blame that on him. I think he should have picked up the cornerback that blitzed there from Colorado. But nonetheless, Khalid Hill and the receivers on the right side of the ball should have probably picked up that cornerback was blitzing and blocked him. But nonetheless, Wilton Speight went 16 of 30 for 229 yards and a touchdown and a quarterback rating of 128.5. So it wasn't a terrible day on paper. It was a good, not great day on paper for Speight. Still finished with over 50% completion percentage. But if you watch the actual game like everybody else did, there was probably 2 or 3 instances where he goes to throw the ball away and it probably should have been picked off. And lucky enough for him, it just rolled off the fingers of the Buffaloes a few times. So a lot of missed opportunities for them there. In the second half, he seemed to settle in. He just didn't have a lot of touch on the deep throws like he usually does. He didn't have any zip on his ball, really. And obviously we saw him ice up the elbow after the game, and he noted the fact that came from the hit that he took on the fumble. So potentially that's an issue going forward. It doesn't look like it will be. But if he can, keep from getting hit this game and keep from getting so unsettled in the pocket, which has been the opposite of him this entire season. He's been very poised. He's been extremely comfortable in the pocket. He's had great touch on his balls, and he's had, he's making the right throws when he needs to. He's throwing it hard when he needs to, like unlike Shane Morris, who usually only throws it hard, and that's kind of why he's never really played. And then with John O'Korn, from what we heard, was that he was making a lot of mistakes in fall camp. He has all the intangibles, but was making a lot of mistakes, throwing picks, fumbles, not waiting for plays to develop. But with Speight, it looked like he had what it took. He was throwing the ball, with zip when he needed to, and then using touch when he had to, and he was throwing really good fade routes and all the things that it takes to be a great quarterback in Division I college football. He didn't bring that last week, and that was pretty obvious. So I think if you're Michigan, you have to concentrate on getting Speight to bring what he brought in the first 2 games. And I think with this Penn State defense that's not that good against the pass. In fact, it's pretty bad against the pass. It's really bad against the outside run. You're able to expose both of those things, which Michigan did so well in last week, was the outside run with Jehu Chesson, with Eddie McDoom, with even with Jabril Peppers, if you want to throw him in there, I mean, they've already used him, but I'm not sure that they're going to use him on offense and open that playbook if they're up big on Penn State. But you're also looking at Chris Evans, a guy who, the true freshman, who had a great game against Hawaii, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns on only 8 carries, which is one hell of a stat. So you put him at wide out, you put him at slot, and you run a jet sweep with him, which he did a lot in high school when I watched him last year. And he could take the ball to the house. I think that the matchups here for Michigan couldn't get any better. It's a game that where Penn State is weak is where Michigan is strongest. So with the pass defense, Michigan has so many weapons, with the reliable Jake Butt, who pretty much catches anything you throw at him and always finds a way to get open, I feel like, too. That's kind of overlooked. He has great hands, but at the same time, he always finds a way to get open, runs great routes. And his blocking is a little bit overlooked, too, as Chris Partridge pointed out. I believe it was actually Tim Drevno pointed out how good his blocking has gotten this season. So look at Jake Butt. You look at Amar Darboh, who is, I think, a surefire draft choice. I mean, he's got probably the best hands on the team. And then you put Jehu Chesson, who has a lot of speed, and Eddie McDoom, the freshman, getting really good, and Grant Perry, who's been a really overlooked player, a true sophomore. So a lot of weapons for Spate to look for that Penn State couldn't cover against Temple, a team who lost by 3 possessions to Army. They only won that game by 1 possession, and it came down to the final quarter there. It wasn't like a comeback or a late surge there for Temple whatsoever. It was actually a late surge from Penn State. So heading into today, you're looking at a Penn State team that just doesn't have enough for me to call this game close. I put in our Land of 10 game prediction piece that came out yesterday that Michigan was going to win this game 56-14, and I want to point out why I said that. You're looking at an offensive line that has struggled for Michigan on the left side of the ball. I think Ben Braden has been, the least impressive. He hasn't really been that great. Grant Newsome has struggled in different parts of the game. I think his pass blocking has been a little bit better than his run blocking. I think a fix for that is Ben Bredesen, the true freshman from Wisconsin, who has really looked good. Graded out significantly better than Braden. I'd throw him in there if I'm Michigan. Again, I'm not Jim Harbaugh, so I don't call those shots, and whatever he does is probably the right move at this point, so I wouldn't really question it. But if I'm Michigan, I throw Ben Bredesen in there, give him a shot, and it's not like you're throwing all your marbles in one. It's not like a starting pitcher or anything like that. If he doesn't do good the first couple of plays, you can just take him out. So it's not really an issue. And that's the same thing with Ben Braden. If you throw him in there again and you keep your trust in him and he still doesn't do good, you can take him out too. But there's definitely got to be some urgency on the left side of the line where, there's a fix there. The UCF game was a little bit of I would say a hoax. They were stacking the box quite a bit, and Michigan just aired the ball out. When you have 8 guys rushing, 5 guys, 9 guys rushing, the 5 offensive linemen, they're going to have issues. They're not going to be able to block 4 more people that's coming at them. But they were able to call a 3-step drop and just pass and throw all over Central Florida. So, as I said, that game was a little bit of a hoax. But if you take last week's, performance, it wasn't very good in the run. Obviously, you saw the sack that led to points. Spate wasn't comfortable in the pocket after that. I don't think he looked very safe back there. And he got rushed a lot and was able to do his little Ben Roethlisberger impression and, evade some sacks. So going into this game, though, it just doesn't seem like Penn State is a better team than Colorado. I don't think it's really close. I think Colorado would probably beat Penn State by a couple of possessions. I think they were just maybe they're more motivated was one thing. Maybe that's why they performed so well against Michigan. But at the same time, if you look at the stats, if you watch both games, Colorado just looks like a better team. They're faster, they're stronger, they're older, they're seniors and they're juniors. They're not injured like Michigan is, like Penn State is. It's just 2 different teams, 2 different situations. It's unfortunate for Penn State to lose all of this, especially heading into Big Ten play, to lose your 3 starting linebackers. But I'm going to stick with that predictions, 56-14. Michigan with a big win today, if you ask me. And then we're going to segue into recruiting when we get back. This is the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Guys, it's more refreshing and cooler than that ice-cold beer while you sit there and mow the lawn. Definitely not you if you're running around in this heat, in that office, wearing that stuffy, smelly, pit-stained dress shirt that's wrinkled to the high heavens. Don't worry now. Uncle Jock's got you covered, or should I say Larry Hunt's got you covered, with their moisture-wicking, anti-odor, breathable 4-way stretch 100% cotton dress shirt that will keep you cool like the other side of the pillow. Look, guys, I've been wearing mine for some time now, and I absolutely love them. They keep me cool, dry, fresh-looking all day long, so I can handle some business during the day and then head out and tear up the night while still looking fresh and clean. On top of it, this is probably the best part. The shirt is made, designed, and crafted by Detroiters in Detroit. See all the incredible styles Lawrence Hunt has to offer. Head over to lawrencehuntfashion.com. That's lawrencehuntfashion.com. If you use promo code DSP, guess what? We'll save you 20% off your order. That's right, 20%. If you don't believe me, listen to Detroit Tigers catcher James McCann.
I'm a jeans and boots kind of guy, and taking my wife out to eat, I love putting on my Lawrence Hunt dress shirt. The way they stretch, the way they feel, they move with my body just like a t-shirt would. I know that I'm wearing a dress shirt, but it really doesn't feel like it.
That's lawrencehuntfashion.com.
All right, so we're talking recruiting now. I guess you could say that's my my primary calling. A lot of people tell me to relax sometimes when I talk my team stuff, but that's never going to happen, so you might as well just face that now. Talking recruiting, it's a good weekend. It's a crazy weekend. So today is going to be the best visitor list, bar none, that we've seen all season. It could be the best one that we see all season. Next week when Wisconsin rolls into town, you're looking at Cesar Ruiz, Alex Leatherwood, that's a 5-star and a 4-star. Leatherwood is a 5-star, and then Ruiz a 4-star. A couple other guys swinging in for that Wisconsin game. That's going to be a visitor list that contends for today's visitor list. If you look at the first 3 games, you saw Tarek Black come into town for the first game against Hawaii. He looked to have a good visit that looked like it put Michigan in the driver's seat for his recruitment. But other than that, J. Raymond Hall was there, but he's a commit, so you're not worried about him or anything. It's great that he's coming into town, so that was there for the Hawaii game. Central Florida game only had a couple of 2018s, Kalen Goodman from Detroit Cast Tech, 4-star cornerback, and then you had DeAndre Square, same rating, same school for him, 4-star defensive back from Cast Tech, and I didn't really see anybody else for that game. And then last week, it kind of got picked up a little bit. You saw commits Joel Honingford, you saw the obvious celebrity of this class, Dylan McCaffrey, was in town, the quarterback from Valor Christian, Colorado. And then you saw commit Raymond Hall. And then you saw surprise visitor Jalen Kelly Powell, the uncommitted defensive back from the 2017 class, 4-star safety from Detroit Cast Tech, coming to town. Surprise visit. He visited Nebraska the week before that, or Oregon the week before that, and then Nebraska the week before Oregon. So good to see him come in town. Don't think it was an official visit. You have to remember here, a lot of people get tripped out. Oh, he's not taking an official visit to Michigan, but he's from Detroit. Why wouldn't he do that? Well, here's the thing. An official visit means, in essence, it's a free visit. It's paid for, it's provided for by the NCAA or however it may be, and you get 5. So when you look at the 5 that you can take, are you really going to waste one on a drive that's 25 minutes away, or you're just going to throw the $15 that it takes for gas and then take a trip to Florida? It's very easy to evaluate that if you're them, So I really wouldn't put much investment into, oh, he's not taking an official visit to Michigan, I'm going to run around my house and freak out. There's really no reason to do that. You're going to see them take more unofficial visits here because they've taken 100 at this point if they're from Cass Tech, because they're here all the time. Their coaches always bring them through. If they really want to come, they can on their own. They might drive themselves at this point, honestly. It's only 25 minutes away because the kids have their license. So I wouldn't put much investment into that. But the fact that they came is a big deal. So Jalen Kelly Powell was here that week. And then today is a very interesting and fun to follow along. It will be fun to follow along visitor list. So you're going to stay updated on my Twitter feed. I'll be updating everything as it goes on, who's enjoying their visit. Hopefully not to hear who isn't. That would be bad news for you guys, but to hear who's enjoying their visit, how it's going. If a commitment happens, of course, that could definitely, conspire. So you're looking at 5-star wide receiver, Don Peoples-Jones from Detroit Cast Tech, the biggest name in all of recruiting, probably in Michigan history at this point. I wouldn't say history. I would say probably in the past, besides Rashawn Gary, probably in the last 5 years. Don Peoples-Jones, it's all you hear around here. It's all the questions I get. Is he going to commit? Is this going to happen? And then you have 4-star wide receiver Oliver Martin from Iowa City rolling into town, a kid who looks like he's a Michigan State lean, has a lot of love from Iowa as well. Obviously, he's from Iowa City. And then you have Michigan in there too. And then you have 4-star wide receiver from Pinson, Alabama, Nico Collins. Now, the number one thing here that is to know of these 3 is they're all taking unofficial visits. What that means for Peoples-Jones is probably nothing, just as I noted before, he's a Detroit kid. But for the Iowa City kid, Oliver Martin, and then for the Alabama kid, Nico Collins, it means that, A, they're willing to invest in a trip to come to Michigan, to come to Ann Arbor. That's probably a lot more expensive for them than a Detroit kid. And it likely means they're going to come back for their official visit, the free visit. So it looks like you might get 2 visits out of these kids, which is huge. We're looking at getting, 2 games for them to come watch. It's one thing to take a visit in the summer, meet the staff and all of that, meet the players, all of that. It's another thing to come and step foot in the big house. It's not your average stadium. It's 110,000, people packed in, especially for the Big Ten opener. So just to give you a little more info on these kids, Nico Collins is 6'5" from Pittston, Alabama, an absolute monster on the at the wideout position. One kid that has visited Michigan 3 times before already in the summer. He visited Michigan 3 times unofficially, so all on his own dime. Calculated, did the math, somewhere around $1,500, $2,500 to do that, which is an investment that he didn't put into in-state Alabama, where he only visited, it looked like 1 to 2 times. Maybe he took a visit and didn't really publish it anywhere, but from what we saw, he only visited Alabama in the summer just 1 or 2 times, where he visited Michigan 3 times. So his crystal ball is 62% Michigan on 24/7, but Alabama has already got 2 or 3 wide receiver commits right now, and Tyrell Shavers and Jerry Jeudy, so it doesn't look like they're going to take. They really haven't pursued Nico Collins. I think they're after a couple of other kids right now, but it doesn't really look like they're pursuing him. I think everyone kind of knows where Nico's headed, but I would say the other one in the mix for him would be Georgia, another school that's trying to, sway them away from Michigan. But at the same time, this is just probably him and Jalen Kelly-Powell. Both of them look like they're about as locks as it gets to head to Michigan. And then you're looking at Peoples-Jones, who's obviously just a freak athlete at 6'3", and probably one of the strongest kids I've ever got the chance to see at his age. He's just a man-child. He doesn't really look like he should be playing high school football. It looks like he should be probably in his senior year. He's 6'2", 192, still not even 18 years old, which is kind of scary. If I looked like that at 17, I don't think I'd be talking to you. I think you'd be talking to me, but, it is what it is. You live and you learn, right? I guess I'll go to the gym now. But his crystal ball still reads 80% Michigan. Other schools in the mix here is Florida, Michigan State, Ohio State. But if you're asking me who the one team that really gives Michigan contention for Peoples-Jones, it's Florida. He's going to go down there and visit for an official here pretty soon. Also visit Florida State. Again, it looks like it's really going to be a Michigan-Florida race, but I still think Michigan runs away with that one as well. And then Oliver Martin's an interesting topic. He's a 4-star from Iowa City. Has a lot of history with family at Michigan State. He had a family member play there. A couple family members attend the school as well, I believe. He received his Michigan offer after he blew up at the opening. He rose to number 247 in the national composite ratings on 24/7, but 24/7 themselves actually rank him number 67 overall in the country and have him as the number 10 receiver in the country. He's 6 foot and a half, and he's 188, and he played with Dylan McCaffrey in the opening on the Michigan team, you can basically call it, and looked great. I mean, he was probably the top receiver there after the weekend, after how good he looked. But you're looking at Michigan State and Notre Dame there and Iowa all in the race. Notre Dame leads the crystal ball. At the same time, I think he has a lot of history at Michigan State. But if you just look at his body, he really does read Michigan State, Notre Dame receiver. He doesn't really look like an Iowa receiver, I guess is the best way to say. I mean, you just look at the bodies that go through these programs, and he just looks like he looks kind of like a Golden Tate would be a good way to put it. Obviously, he's not in the pros, and he might be, he might not be. Wishing the best, but I don't think he screams Golden Tate just yet. But the body is there. So there's a little speculation that he might not go on this Michigan trip and he might head to Notre Dame. So we'll see what happens there. We've heard a lot of both. I think whichever team he doesn't attend could be out of the race. So we'll see what happens there. I think if he doesn't go to Michigan, they could take a backseat to Notre Dame and Michigan State. Maybe even take the backseat to Iowa. We'll see what happens there. But the Fighting Irish are leading the way for Martin right now, which is kind of a recent development. So as far as any commitments happening this weekend, you see Torrey Bateman heading into town as well. He's 6'8". He's an offensive lineman from Gadsden City, Alabama. He's a 3-star. Publicly said that Michigan is his leader. Publicly said that he might commit this weekend, which is a bold statement. Not a lot of kids are going to tell you that. So seems like from what my sources have told me, there is a little bit of behind the scenes things that have to get figured out in order for Bateman to commit. It sounds like he has wanted to before, but unfortunately, circumstances happen. So I think those circumstances are still there for him and probably won't be able to commit on Saturday for whatever reason, as much as he wants to. He's got some behind the scenes thing figured out. So we'll see what happens there. But I think if Michigan wants him and he has all these things figured out, that could happen on Saturday. As far as the 3 receivers committing, I noted in my Justice Report piece that goes up on Lane 10 every single day, daily, a recruiting update and a recruiting notebook. I noted the fact that of these 3 receivers, Martin, Peoples-Jones, and Collins, one could commit during the game, but I don't think we're going to find out about it. I think it's going to be a silent behind-the-scenes thing. You have to remember that as soon as these kids commit, every other school, besides maybe 1 or 2, are going to back off. And then allowing them to come for official visits kind of stops. Teams back off, and Harbaugh is a coach that wants these kids to enjoy the process, and he seems understanding. Remember, with Brady Hoke, he wouldn't let them take any other visits. So as far as any commitments this weekend, I think that is going to be the gist of it. If anybody does commit, it's Bateman, as long as circumstances work out for him. And then of the receivers, I think someone could commit. We're just not going to find out about it. As far as Nico Collins, I think he is as close to a lock for Michigan as it gets. Peoples-Jones, a little bit of work to do with Florida. And then obviously Martin, if he shows up at Notre Dame, then Michigan has a lot of work ahead with him. So we're going to answer some questions that I received on Twitter when we get back. This is the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I want to tell you about our newest sponsor, Team Top Cat Sales. Are you looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or corporation? Look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak, between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan QB John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the highest quality and best service. Get your organization, school, or club team all in with Adidas today by going to TopCatTeamSales.com. That's TopCatTeamSales.com. Also, follow Top Cat on Twitter at Team Top Cat.
Who's got it better than us? Nobody. Who's got it better than us?
All right, we're back here on the Justice Report. I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. I've had a lot of fun with this. It's been a blast, honestly. Having the opportunities to do the things that I do has been pretty crazy for me. And anybody who really knows me kind of knows how thankful I am for it. So I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm going to answer some questions that you guys sent to me on Twitter. I used to do this all the time on my old podcast, the old Justice Report. And that is not going to change. We're going to keep this going. I'm going to answer some questions, give you some shout outs with the Twitter names and all of that. And we are going to get to it. Vinny Renda, Vinny Mac 25, asks, Michigan has one safety in Jamarick Woods and pursuing Jalen Kelly Powell. Anyone else has possible targets at that position? Vinny, I don't think that is an area of concern for them to grab more than two safeties. I think Jamarick Woods and Jalen Kelly Powell at the free safety and strong safety position going forward is comfortable enough for them. Tyree Cannell is a great safety. He could probably start in a lot of teams right now. He's obviously taking the second fiddle to Delano Hill and DeMonte Thomas's safety spots, but I think they're comfortable at that position. They have Khaleke Hudson coming up behind them, who's one of those kids that, like Peoples-Jones, is a man-child, and I would pay money to look like. It's a good way to put it. Just another ginormous kid. So he also asks the question, which wide receiver can block like Chesson out of the possible 2017 recruits Michigan is recruiting? I think you go right back to Peoples-Jones. I mean, he's a huge kid. He's really technically sound. He does all the right things, has all the mechanics. Not only does he have the talent, but he, like I said, brings the mechanics and has those kind of things going for him. And you're going to hear Peoples-Jones as a name that I bring up a lot if you ask about the receivers in 2017, because he's just an anomaly. He's one of those kids that you don't see come too often. Kind of like the Rashawn Gary that they got last season. I don't think that to that magnitude, because as people pointed out in his entire recruitment and thereafter, Gary is probably the best recruit to come out in the modern era ever. And we're seeing that at firsthand, as he had a great game last week where he had 1.5, I think he had a half sack and 9 tackles. It's an unbelievable game for him. And then moving on to the next question here, Moudini, 31, said, what's up with Drake Johnson still healing up from the forklift? Also, where do you think Michigan's 2017 class ranks at the end? Two great questions. I'll start with the first one. I think Drake Johnson is still suffering from something. The forklift incident is probably the number one thing you can, point out, because obviously that did happen. As again, unfortunate, but it did happen. I think that might be the issue there. It's just lingering on, and you know how Harbaugh's been this season, trying to save everyone and make sure they don't get a long-term injury. You saw that with Jordan Lewis. You're seeing it with Taco Charlton, they both look to be playing today. Brian Monet, those kind of guys. But with Drake Johnson, he's not even dressing. It really doesn't look like he's going to play this season, unfortunately. A possibility here is a medical redshirt. Michigan's losing Davion Smith. They might be losing Ty Isaac. So what happens there? You bring in Drake Johnson. You have a senior leader in there that's able to, play another season. So we'll see what happens there. But he might have already used that medical redshirt when he tore his ACL in his sophomore year, I believe. So we'll see what happens there. Again, hopefully the kid can figure out a way to come back. And hopefully he can find a way to get back into the game this season, because he's a great kid, and I'd be unfortunate to see him have to miss it again for another injury. He's tore his ACL twice, and now he's doing this. Just unfortunate for him. Ian Kuza asks a little bit of O-line talk, and what's your Penn State score prediction? So I put in there 56-14. I'm going to stick with that. As far as the O-line goes, like I said, I think Ben Bredesen needs to be, entered into the starting group after what I've seen the first 3 weeks. I think he's consistent. I think he's graded out better than Ben Braden. I think he's puts a good protection on the left side with he and Grant Newsome. I think they work together well, too, and they meshed really well in the Hawaii game. Obviously, Hawaii isn't the toughest opponent, but I think the two meshed well, and I think you can just give him a shot. If it doesn't work out, you can always replace him, but that's vice versa as well. If they're seeing something in Ben Braden in practice that they're not seeing on game day, something we're not seeing out of him, if he performs really well during practice, but can't on game day, but either way, I put Bredesen in there if I'm Michigan. SDB News, SD Brown 33 said, do you think Michigan will air it out because so many key wide receivers will be there? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think this Penn State pass defense is a threat whatsoever to what Michigan brings to the table. As I pointed out earlier, Spate had a little bit of a weakness with his touch on the ball last season. A little touch on the passes really wasn't there. But in the first 2 weeks, he brought that. So to count him out as to not bring that for the rest of the season would be wrong because he obviously had brought that to the table for the first 2 weeks. I think he brings that back in week 4. I think the matchups again set up nice. I think he's going to be well protected, especially if Bredesen's in there. Yeah, I think they're definitely going to air it out. I think you're going to see a lot of Chris Evans. I think this defense is a defense that Chris Evans could shut up. So we'll see there. And obviously Davion Smith, this is his backfield still, in my opinion. And I think he could do the same. But, Michigan could put up realistically 400, 500 yards in this game of offense, potentially even more with what Penn State has given up to teams like, Temple and Army and Pitt, etc. So we'll see what happens there. Or not Army, I'm sorry, but Temple and Pitt, etc. So we'll see what happens there. Somebody asked about the health of Monet. Again, Brian Monet, not sure what's going on there. It's said that he'll be back by Wisconsin, which is obviously next week's game and a huge game. We'll see how they perform against Sparty today. So with Monet, it looks like he's going to be back by next week. We'll see if it's lingered or anything like that. We'll be hearing from them soon. All right. And then Billy Ho 4 said, any idea on what targets and commits would be early enrollees? Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to be an early enrollee, so we'll have his decision by December 9th. And then as far as anybody else goes in the early enrollee market, I'm not entirely sure. That really doesn't come out until midway through the season. They have to figure out a lot of things and qualify. Usually towards the end of the first semester, you're going to find out because that's when they'll find out. Will Lewis and Charlton play? Jordan Lewis, Taco Charlton, 2 seniors, 2 great players. Not entirely sure, not 100% sure, I should say, if they're going to play. But as Harbaugh said on the radio, if God willing and the creek don't rise, Jordan Lewis and Taco Charlton will play today. That's huge for the defense. That's probably why you asked. And I think they're finally going to see some time. And then our last question here is, how successful will Michigan be at stopping Barkley on Saturday and any chance of visitor commits? That's from Zach Woodruff 3. I think Saquon Barkley is a great running back, but I think that in order to be a great running back, you have to have a good offensive line. You have to have good blocking from, the wideouts as well, and also the tight ends. I don't think that Penn State has that right now, and Michigan's matchups to kind of go against them works out perfectly for them. You're looking at a defensive line that could be the best unit in football. On third down, they're first in the country in third down, 25% ahead of who's in second, which is Central Michigan, so they're keeping it in the state. So, again, going back to Barkley, I think they bring a great run defense, and Barkley isn't, a world beater just yet. He's a great running back, don't get me wrong, and Michigan defensive lineman Mo Hurst said he's one of the best running backs he's ever seen play, but he's not a UCF or a Colorado running back that runs to the outside. He's not really an outside runner. He's quick and all, but they're really going to stick. And they've tried to move to the spread, but again, that's kind of a project. So we'll see what happens there. But again, I just think that the matchups for Michigan works out well. They're going to beat up this offensive line, I think, all day. And Ryan Glasgow in the interior, so they can't really run up the middle. You haven't seen anybody run up the middle all season. I think if we were able to take a look at that, I'm going to try and figure out if there's a way to how many yards that a running back has gotten up the middle on Michigan this season. Really hasn't been any. You saw the UCF run that went for 80 yards. That was on the outside. And then you saw Colorado try to run up the middle and have no success all game. And that's why they only finished with about, I believe it was 50 rushing yards that game. Let me check here and see. 64 rushing yards they had all game. So a team that the week before they gave up 275. And that was, again, on a spread offense that was running on the outside. And I just don't see Penn State bringing that to the table. Basically, to answer your question, I think they're going to stop him. And it won't be, I shouldn't say it would be easy, but it's going to be, convenient for them given the matchups. And the linebackers playing really good ball. Ben Gideon had 12 tackles last week. And Jabril Peppers had the career of, the game of his career. Take out the punt return for the touchdown. And he still had the game of his career on defense. Just unbelievable. And then he also asked the question, any chance a visitor commits? Well, Zach, as I pointed out, I think that somebody could commit, and I think if there is someone, it's Nico Collins, but we don't find out about it. I think he could commit behind the scenes and still take his visits and everything. As I said, schools tend to back off when somebody commits, so we'll see what happens there. But I think that Tariq Bateman is a kid that if the circumstances work out for him, that he wants to commit. I think the kid wants to go to the University of Michigan, but he obviously has to figure things out behind the scenes. Whether or not that happens, we're unsure of. So we'll figure out that later today if he commits or not. And as always, I'll keep you updated on that. And that about wraps up today's show, the inaugural episode of the Justice Report 2.0, as I should say, obviously, the rebirth of the show for the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am Brandon Justice, and that is the Justice Report. Enjoy today's game.
Who's got it better than